working. I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes or a minute or two to find this. Okay. A little bit more time. Okay. Well, hello, and welcome to Storytime Live with Srta Pikula, and I hope that all of you are doing very well today. Happy Thursday, and kind of happy Friday, because we are not having school tomorrow. And don't worry, I'll send all of you an email about that. But we are not having school tomorrow, so if you don't find anything on Srta tomorrow, it's because we don't have school tomorrow. So we're going to do a recap on what we read last time in Prince Caspian. So we're on chapter 8, which is how they left the island. And we learned that Trumpkin is the dwarf who has been telling the whole story of Caspian to the children. And then they were discussing this, and we always know that Trumpkin's a little bit doubtful, but all of a sudden they were saying there, and Trumpkin said he was like, oh, he's like, we're kind of hopeless now. And all the children were like, well, why? And he's like, well, we were expecting help to come. And the children were offended, especially Edmund. Not entirely, but Edmund kind of was getting a little angry. And he was like, so you think we can't help? Like, we are the kings and queens of old, and you of the golden age of Narnia, and you think we can't help? And Trumpkin, who was puzzled, he was like, well, like, we love children, but we were looking for warriors. And so Edmund again was getting a little feisty and was like, oh, well, we'll show you. And Peter had a really great idea. And he was like, well, he's like, hey, let's show him that we know how to fight. So they went in to their treasure chamber in Cair Paravel, and they got armor. And then Edmund had a sword fighting match with Trumpkin, and Trumpkin got pretty badly beaten. And then Susan, they said, they're like, well, let's how do you do further? Let's have a shooting match with Susan. And there was a hanging apple that was really far away, and Susan shot the apple with her arrow, and Trumpkin was also defeated there. And he was like, all right, I get it. You guys are the real thing. You are the real kings and queens of Narnia. So that is how that worked. And then they decided on how they were going to get off the island. So we're going to do that. Let's see, can I see the light might be a little. You know what? We can just sit. I don't know where I'm going. Let's just sit right here. That's fine. Hopefully it won't be too crazy. There, we can do it right there. And then y'all can see me. Okay. So they're trying to decide how to get off the island. Oh, also Lucy healed Trumpkin with her cordial, her magical cordial. So let's start where we left off. And now, said Peter, if you've really decided to believe in us, I have, said the dwarf. It's quite clear what we have to do. We must join King Caspian at once. The sooner the better, said Trumpkin. My being such a fool already wasted about about an hour. It's about a 2-day journey the way you came, said Peter. For us, I mean. We can't walk all day and night like you dwarfs. Then he turned to the others. What Trumpkin calls Aslan's how is obviously the stone table itself. You remember it was about half a day's march, or a little less, from there down to the forts of Baruna. Baruna's Bridge, we call it, said Trumpkin. There was no bridge in our time, said Peter. And then from Baruna down here was another day and a bit. We used to get home about tea time on the second day, going easily. Going hard, we could do the whole thing in a day and a half, perhaps. But remember, it's all woods now, said Trumpkin, and there are enemies to dodge. Look here, said Edmund. Need we go by the same way that our dear little friend came? No more of that, your majesty, if you love me, said the dwarf. Very well, said Edmund. May I say our DLF? Oh, Edmund, said Susan, don't keep on at him like that. That's all right, lass. I mean, your majesty, said Trumpkin with a chuckle. A die won't raise a blister. And after that, they often called him the DLF till they'd almost forgotten what it meant. As I was saying, continued Edmund, we needn't go that way. Why shouldn't we row a little south till we come to Glasswater Creek and row it up it? That brings us up behind the hill of the stone table, and we'll be safe while we're at sea. If we start at once, we can go at the head of Glasswater before dark, get a few hours sleep, and be with Caspian pretty early tomorrow. What a thing it is to know the coast, said Trumpkin. None of us knows anything about Glasswater. What about food? Asked Susan. Oh, well, we'll have to do with apples, said Lucy. Do let's get on. We've done nothing yet, and we've already been here nearly 2 days. And anyway, no one's going to have my hat for a fishing basket again, said Edmund. They used one of the raincoats as a kind of bag and put a good many apples in it. Then they all had a good long drink at the well, for they would have no more fresh water till they landed at the head of the creek, and went down to the boat. The children were sorry to leave Cape Paravel, which, even in ruins, had begun to feel like home again. The DLF had better steer, said Peter, and Ed and I will take an oar each. Half a moment, though. We'd better take off our mail. We're going to be pretty warm before we're done. The girls had better be in the bows and shout directions to the DLF because he doesn't know the way. You'd better get us fair out to sea till we pass the island. And soon the green wooded coast of the island was falling away behind them, and its little bays and headlands were beginning to look flatter, and the boat was rising and falling in a gentle swell. The sea began to grow bigger around them, and in the distance, bluer. But close round the boat, it was green and bubbly. Everything smelled salt, and there was no noise except the swishing of water and the clap, clap of the water against the sides and the splash of the oars and the jolting noise of the rowlocks. The sun grew hot. It was delightful for Lucy and Susan in the bows, bending over the edge and trying to get their hands in the sea, which they could never quite reach. The bottom, mostly pure pale sand, but with occasional patches of purple seaweed, could be seen beneath them. It's like the old times, said Lucy. Do you remember our voyage to Terabithia and Galma and Seven Isles and the Lone Islands? Yes, said Susan, and our great ship, the Splendor Hyalan, with its swan's head at her prow and the carved swan's wings coming back almost to her waist, and the silken sails and the great stern lanterns and the feasts on the poop deck and the musicians. Do you remember when we had the musicians up in the rigging playing flutes so that it sounded like music out of the sky? Presently, Susan took over Edmund's oar, and he came forward to join Lucy. They had passed the island now and stood closer into the shore, all wooded and deserted. They would have thought it very pretty if they had not remembered the time when it was open and breezy and full of merry friends. Phew, this is pretty grueling work, said Peter. Can't I row for a bit? Said Lucy. The oars are too big for you, said Peter shortly, not because he was cross, but because he had no strength to spare for talking. Chapter 9. what Lucy saw. Susan and the two boys were bitterly tired with rowing before they rounded the last headland and began the final pull of Glasswater itself, and Lucy's head ached from the long hours of sun and the glare of the water on their faces. Even Trunken longed for the voyage to be over. The seat on which he sat to steer had been made for men, not for dwarves, and his feet did not reach the floorboards, and everyone knows how uncomfortable it is even for 10 minutes. And as they all grew more tired, their spirits fell. Up till now, the children had only been thinking of how to get to Caspian. Now they wondered what they would do when they found him and how a handful of dwarves and woodland creatures could defeat an army of grown up humans. Twilight was coming on as they rode slowly up the windings of Glasswater Creek, a twilight which deepened as the banks drew closer together and the overhanging trees began almost to meet overhead. It was very quiet in here as the sound of the sea died away behind them, and they could even hear the trickle of the little streams that poured down from the forest into Glasswater. They went ashore at last, far too tired to attempt lighting a fire, and even a supper of apples, though most of them felt that they never wanted to see an apple ever again, seemed better than trying to catch or shoot anything. After a little silent munching, they all huddled down together in the moss and dead leaves between four large beech trees. Everyone except Lucy went to sleep at once. Lucy, being far less tired, found it hard to get comfortable. She had forgotten till now that all dwarves snore. She knew that one of the best ways to give getting to sleep is to stop trying, so she opened her eyes. Through a gap in the bracken and branches, she could just see a patch of water in the creek and the sky above it. Then, with a thrill of memory, she saw again, after all those years, the bright Narnian stars. She had once known them better than the stars of our own world, because as a queen in Narnia, she had gone to bed much later than as a child in England. And there they were, at least three of the summer constellations could be seen from where she lay: the ship, the hammer, and the leopard. Dear old leopard, she murmured happily to herself. Instead of getting drowsier, she was getting more awake, with an odd nighttime dreamish kind of wakefulness. The creek was growing brighter. She knew now that the moon was on it, and she couldn't see them, although she couldn't see the moon. And now she began to feel the whole forest was coming awake like herself. Hardly knowing why she did it, she got up quickly and walked a little distance away from the campsite. This is lovely, said Lucy to herself. It was cool and fresh. Delicious smells were floating everywhere. Somewhere close by, she heard the twitter of a nightingale beginning to sing, then stopping, then beginning again. It was a little lighter ahead. She went towards the light and came to a place where there were fewer trees, and the whole patches or pools of moonlight. But the moonlight and the shadows so mixed that you could hardly be sure where anything or what was or what it was. At the same moment, the nightingale, satisfied at last with his tuning up, burst into full song. Lucy's eyes began to grow accustomed to the light, and she saw the trees that were nearest her more distinctly. A great longing for the old days when the trees could talk in Narnia came over her. She knew exactly how each of these trees would talk if only she could wake them, and what sort of human form would put on. She looked at the silver birch. It would have a soft, showery voice that would look like a slender girl with hair blown all about her face and fond of dancing. She looked at the oak. He would be a wizened but hardy old man with a frizzled beard and warts on his face and hands, and hair growing out of the warts. She looked at the beech under which she was standing. Ah, she would be the best of all. She would be a gracious goddess, smooth and stately, a lady of the wood. Oh, trees, 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 said Lucy, though she had not been intending to speak at all. Oh, trees, wake, wake up. Don't you remember it? Don't you remember me? Dryads and hammer dryads, come out, come to me. Though there was not a breath of wind, they all stirred about her. The rustle of noise of the leaves was almost like words. The nightingale stopped singing as if to listen to it. Lucy felt that at any moment she would begin to understand what the trees were trying to say. But the moment did not come. The rustling died away. The nightingale resumed its song. Even in the moonlight, the wood looked more ordinary again. Yet Lucy had the feeling, as you sometimes have when you are trying to remember a name or a date and almost get it, but it vanishes before you really do, that she had just missed something, as if she had spoken to the trees a split second too soon or a split second too late, or used all the right words except one, or put in one word that had been just wrong. Quite suddenly, she began to feel tired. She went back to the campsite, snuggled down between Susan and Peter, and was asleep in a few minutes. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. And I hope that you have a fantastic Thursday and a good weekend. And also a happy Easter. Because we don't have school tomorrow, there will be no story time tomorrow. Okay, so we will continue again on Monday. And I hope all of you have a great day.